Rain fell softly on the tarmac as a black SUV rolled into Abuja. No fanfare, no words. Just boots hitting the ground and one man stepping out. Calm, focused, silent. He wasn't there to smile for cameras or trade empty speeches. He was there to shift the future of West Africa. And he did, without saying a word. In a world where politicians love microphones, one soldier president walked into the room, stayed quiet, and left the entire continent speechless. This is how Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso made the most powerful man in West Africa look like a guest at his own summit. Welcome back to our Chanel, where we uncover stories buried beneath headlines. Raw, unfiltered, and unforgettable. Today, we dive into the drama, diplomacy, and quiet revolution that unfolded behind the golden curtains of the ECOWAS summit in Abuja. It started as just another gathering of leaders. By the end, alliances were rewritten. The loudest man in the room was silenced, and a single sentence whispered, "Off mic" became a rallying cry across a continent. This isn't just a story about African politics. It's a story about dignity, about leadership, about what happens when a soldier chooses silence over sound bites. And still wins. The Summit of Shadows. The ECOWAS summit was supposed to be about unity. Instead, it became a battleground. One without bullets, but with weapons just as sharp. Words, stares, and silence. Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré arrived with a calm that made people nervous. He didn't shake hands with cameras, he didn't flash a grin, and he certainly didn't care for the whispers behind closed doors calling him a boy with a gun. Tinubu, Nigeria's president and the supposed heavyweight of the summit, mocked Traoré publicly. "Leadership," he said smugly, "is not for boys in uniform." But something unexpected happened. Traoré didn't respond. He didn't blink. And that silence? It shook the room harder than any speech. The stare that spoke louder than words. As Tinubu laughed and flexed his old-school political muscle, Traoré simply watched. And then, the room began to watch him. Suddenly, the ministers who once nodded at Tinubu's every word were stealing glances at Traoré. Even Guinea and Mali, who had long been treated like outliers, shifted closer. Not just politically, but physically. Something had changed. Tinubu controlled the microphone. But Traoré controlled the mood. Later that evening, in a dimly lit room far from the chandelier dinners, Traoré met with leaders from Guinea and Mali. No cameras, no press. Just plans. Bold ones. Routes. Minerals. Defense. A vision for the region without ECOWAS and without foreign approval. The mic that was never meant to be on. Then came the moment no one saw coming. During the final minutes of the summit, as leaders packed up, a stray microphone caught Traoré whispering to an aide, "Africa doesn't need dominance. It needs dignity." That one sentence, not meant for the world, exploded across social media like wildfire. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. In Dakar, it was projected onto buildings. In Lagos, young Nigerians began to ask hard questions. Is this the kind of leadership we mock, or the kind we need? And just like that, Traoré didn't just make a point. He started a movement. The agreement that changed everything. While other presidents were still sipping coffee, Traoré made his final move. A private meeting. No headlines. No official ECOWAS stamp. Burkina Faso, Mali, Guinea. 3 signatures, 1 deal. Independent trade, shared resources. No French banks, no foreign currency, and no Tinubu. When Nigeria's representative tried to protest, Traoré replied calmly, "ECOWAS didn't consult us when they sanctioned our survival. Game, set, match." The story wasn't about rebellion anymore. It was about redirection, about building, not breaking. Absolutely. Let's expand the script further to bring it closer to the 8 to 9 minute mark, with additional depth, emotional resonance, and historical parallels that enhance the weight of Traoré's quiet revolution. The ghost of Sankara. In the streets of Ouagadougou, murals of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary, the legend, the man who once said, "He who feeds you controls you," stood newly repainted. And now, beside them, another face was being added. Not because Traoré made fiery speeches, not because he defied Western powers on live TV, but because, like Sankara, he did something most leaders fear. He said no without yelling it. He refused to be boxed in, bought out, or baited. And just like Sankara, Traoré spoke through action. Quiet ones. Agreements signed in the shadows. Alliances built on trust, not Twitter followers. Dignity over dominance. In the eyes of many, it was as if the ghost of Sankara had returned. Not in spirit, but in strategy. The noiseless coup. Make no mistake. What happened in Abuja wasn't just a diplomatic curveball, it was a noiseless coup. Not of power, but of influence. Tinubu, with his tailored suits and talk show charm, had everything a modern statesman is supposed to have. Except the one thing Traoré brought with him: authentic authority. When the cameras zoomed in, they caught Traoré sitting still, eyes focused, not because he was nervous, but because he was calculating. Every insult thrown at him made more people turn their heads. Every moment of restraint made his presence louder. And when it was finally his time to speak, he didn't use volume, he used vision. "We are not breaking from Africa," he said. "We are breaking from control." Those weren't just words. That was a declaration. Not of war, not of rebellion, but of independence. The kind that can't be sanctioned away. A younger generation watches, and while the summit halls emptied, another room was filling the internet. On TikTok, Gen Z creators from Nairobi to Conakry stitched clips of Traoré's silent stare next to Tinubu's smirk. On Twitter, X, the hashtag number Africa with Dignity began to trend. University students broke down his strategy like analysts. Young professionals shared the viral clip on WhatsApp with the caption, "This is what leadership looks like when it grows out of hardship, not handshakes." And perhaps the most powerful shift? Nigerian youth, Tinubu's own countrymen, weren't rushing to defend him. They were thinking, debating, reconsidering. For a generation disillusioned by performative politics, Traoré wasn't a rebel. He was a blueprint. No crowds, no claps, just clarity. And maybe that's what scared the old guard the most. Not that Traoré was loud, but that he didn't need to be. He didn't stand on a stage screaming for validation. He walked through corridors quietly forming a new Africa. One that builds before it speaks, one that moves without applause. When the summit ended, there was no dramatic exit, no victory parade, just a black SUV rolling away in the fog. Inside, a man looked out the window, not for cameras, not for confirmation, but for clarity. And with just a few words, he summed up everything. "History is not made at the podium," he said. "It's made when no one is clapping." And that's when you realize you just witnessed the quietest power move in modern African history. The leader who never raised his voice. As the summit ended and planes took off, one SUV slipped quietly through the fog. No press, no statement. Just Traoré, calm as ever. He said nothing to the cameras because he didn't need to. He had already spoken, in silence, in action, in restraint. And in homes across Africa, people weren't cheering the loudest man in the room. They were listening to the one who never had to shout. If this story moved you, hit that like button so more people hear it. Subscribe for more real stories that reveal what the headlines hide. And tell us in the comments, what kind of leadership do you believe Africa needs right now? Because maybe, just maybe, the next revolution won't be televised. It'll be whispered.